Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another discussion video. This time, I want to talk about, briefly, because I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I think it's interesting as I reflect on my collecting, and maybe as some of you reflect on your collecting. What are some things, when it comes to this hobby, you said you would never do, you would never get? Let me talk to you a little bit about it. I remember the first thing. When I first came back to the hobby, there's a couple things actually, but I'll just talk about this one first, because I know I mentioned it in one of my earlier comic book hauls. If you watch those terrible videos that came out in the summer and into the fall of 2014, you might have heard me mention this once or twice. I don't remember, but one of the things that I said that I would never get, that I wound up getting a lot of over the years, or date stamps on comics. When I came back to the hobby, when I started collecting in 1993, as you know, as you're often reminded, I started collecting in 1993. I don't remember date stamps. Largely because I probably didn't have a whole lot of Silver Age books. And maybe the ones that I did have that had a date stamp, I didn't know what it was and it didn't bother me. Because, I was just collecting what I could get. But when I came back to the hobby, able to get more, wanting to upgrade, and seeing books, having access to more books, largely because of eBay and other online websites, whether it's Comic Connect or Metropolis or whatever, where I have more access to get books, I started noticing these date stamps and found out, well, it's, when the book came at the stand, they were stamped. And I'm saying to myself, really? That's like crazy. Why would I want to buy something that has that ink on it? Why would I want to buy something? Isn't that a defect? Well, as we know, date stamps are not considered a defect because it's sort of like grandfathered in that was just the way things were done back in the day. So you can't really put too much fault to it. I believe that's the argument for it when it comes to date stamps. But anyway, regardless of that, I was like, wow, I would never buy a book that has a date stamp willingly or knowingly, or anything like that. Well, that's changed. That's something that I said I would never do that I wound up embracing. Over the years, I learned, or at least matured a bit, to realize that, they're not so bad after all. It's almost like a piece of history. It's pretty cool to see, like one of the books that comes to mind that has a date stamp. I have a bunch of ECs that have some date stamps, but one of the books that comes to mind with a date stamp is my Amazing Spider-Man 101. It was an upgrade. And it has it on the moon on that cover, for those that are familiar with the cover. And it's cool to see when this book actually hit the newsstands compared to the date that's on the comic, whatever that was. I forget what the date Marvel gave Amazing Spider-Man 101. But it's completely different than the one that it actually came out on. Like Amazing Fantasy, right? Amazing Fantasy 15 is dated August 1962. I don't have a date stamp on my Amazing Fantasy 15, but Amazing Fantasy came out more like June 1962. So things like that. Same thing. X-Men #1 came out September 1963, but it was most likely on the stands in July of 1963 or around that time. So I find seeing the date stamps on it, I learned to appreciate that over time, and definitely something that I had to go back on. What's another thing I said I would never collect, but wound up collecting and not really minding so much? I might have been pretty brief with this one, but again, it's one that comes from the same time period, the earlier videos. I said that I would never collect Batman books because I felt I only wanted to collect X-Men books when I came back to the hobby. X-Men was one of my favorite series to collect for, and I'm going to make sure I get all the X-Men books, and I'm going to make sure I get them in nice shape, and the hell with everything else, even Spider-Man, especially Batman, because how can I collect Batman books? All of the big grails are super expensive. Well, that didn't last too long. That started to break down pretty early, though. I think it was maybe, I keep forgetting that the first video you have access to on my channel, the very, very earliest, is, I think it's Comic Book Haul #1. But that, in truth, that's not really the first video I made. That came out in August 2014, but I was making videos since the end of June, mid-June, the end of June 2014. I made a bunch of videos that, you should check your books. There were a couple other videos when I first got the X-Men #1, how I did an unboxing for it. Those videos are no longer available on my channel. And during that time, I think I mentioned that I would never collect Batman. So I don't know if I actually mentioned it in any of those earlier haul videos, because that's all I did for a couple of years. Where I did comic book hauls and a couple of subscriber videos and all that other stuff. Remember when people would, let's try to get this guy to 300 and all that stuff. And it's like, ugh. How times have changed, or at least for me. So that's when I think I mentioned it. So for those watching the earlier videos, I don't remember you saying that. It's probably become one of those deleted videos, but I know I said it. And I said it because, what I just mentioned to you a few moments ago, that I thought that they would be just too expensive, and they were expensive. They're even more expensive now. But that changed pretty early, because I think by comic book haul number 3, I think even 2, is when I first got Detective Comics 359. That's a Batman book. It's first married to Batgirl, Barbara Gordon. And that was a big book to get back then. I mean, it went up a little bit, right? I have like a 6.0 CBCS, so that's a topic for another video. But it was in comic book haul number 3 when I got first Ra's al Ghul, and I was really into that. And then shortly after that, I got I had a Detective Comics 400, a 9.0 First Man Bat. That was a beautiful book. I wound up selling it and wound up getting a 7.5, which is still pretty good, but I do miss that 9.0. That would be a regret of mine. I was like, oh, it was such a beautiful book. But the point I'm trying to make to you is that I went back on that one pretty quickly, within a few months. At least with date stamps, it took me about a good year to go back on that one. But this one, I was like, I'm never going to collect Batman. Oh, wait, maybe I should get that. And collecting Batman, it's hard to collect Batman. You want to get the first Penguin. Well, at least I do. It's kind of hard to get that. It's kind of hard to spend that money on the first Penguin when that money could go toward a big Marvel key, So you really have to navigate the waters here. But eventually I'd like to go back and upgrade some of my Batmans. And it was a lot of fun collecting Batman. It's a lot of fun to collect. So that's one thing I went back on. Another thing I went back on. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, I know I've been talking about for almost 8 minutes now. I'll spend another couple minutes talking about this before I close the video. And I think I said this in comic book haul number 1 or 2. And I went, again, it's another one of those I went back on. I said I would not collect books because of a film. And I think I mentioned that about Guardians of the Galaxy. Like I said, all this goes back. Talking about this topic has really brought me back to when I first started making videos in that first few months. So it's pretty a little bit of nostalgia here. So a lot of things I'm talking about bring me back to then. But during that summer, Guardians of the Galaxy came out. And I saw it, and I really liked it. And I remember everyone's, on Facebook and YouTube and other places going crazy trying to get all the Guardians of the Galaxy books, right? And all of that. I said, I think I said, I forget what video I said it in. Oh, I'm not going to fall for that trap. I'm not going to start hunting down all the Guardians. I'm not going to get Howard the Duck because he was at the end of the movie, and everyone's like all of a sudden interested in Fear 19. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. But I think by comic book haul number 2, or maybe it was even number 1. I don't remember. I got it. I got Fear 19, and I was starting to collect the Guardians books. And I think it was originally comic book haul number 2, the one with the Detective 359 I mentioned, the first Barbara Gordon. I got the first appearance of Thanos and Drax the Destroyer. That was my first copy. That was a 7.0. I sold that one off 4 years later. Or 3.5 years later to help get that Incredible Hulk number 1 I got. But eventually I got Iron Man 55 again. This time I got like an 8.5, which is much nicer. So I was very happy I did that. But yeah, I fell for it too. I was like, oh, I'm not going to be chasing after Thanos or Drax. It's crazy. It's stupid to get those things. Well, I wound up doing it. And I wound up getting them all. I mean, I never got Groot. But I got Star-Lord, both of his appearances, the Marvel preview 4, and then the Marvel Spotlight second series number 6. I got the Rocket Raccoon both issues, the Gamora, obviously the Drax, and Howard the Duck, because he just had that little cameo at the end. Wound up getting Yondu and the Guardians of the Galaxy and Marvel Superheroes number 18. You know, it was great. I enjoyed it, but it was another one of those things that I said I would never do, and I wound up doing it. So, all that being said, what about you? What are some things when it comes to this hobby you said you would never do, but then you wound up later embracing? Was it like date stamps? Was it collecting pre-code horror books? Was it collecting Marvel books? What was it for you, if anything? Thank you for watching, everybody. Take care.